everyone, Coach Sipho here, and today we are going to learn the two Rook Endgames every serious chess player should know. These two endgames are the foundation of all the Rook and Pawn endgames. If you don't know these two endgames well enough, you can end up drawing a game you were supposed to win, or even worse, you can end up losing a game you were supposed to draw. So without wasting any more time, let's dive into them. Number one, this is the Lucena position, and the basic characteristic of the Lucena position is that the winning side has a pawn, usually on the 7th rank, and the rook, and the losing side has a rook and the king only. Even though this position is completely winning for white, but the winning side usually has some few challenges. The first challenge is that it is difficult for the white player to move the king away so that we can be able to push the pawn and promote it to a bigger piece. As you can see that we cannot move the king to the c file because of that rook, and we cannot move the king that side because of the king. Remember, the two kings cannot touch. We solve our first challenge by making a check. After this check, the opponent's king will move away, and it will be possible for us to move our king and push the pawn and promote it to a bigger piece. Even though we've solved our first challenge, it is still difficult for white to win the game, because if white moves the king, black will keep on checking us. When we go there, black checks, go there, black checks, goes there, black checks. Pay attention that you cannot move too far from the pawn because you are going to lose it. So you must keep in contact with the pawn. So this will be a perpetual check, because if you move away, now you will lose your pawn. We solve challenge number 2 by building a shelter. Most people call it building a bridge. Other people call it building a barrier. It doesn't really matter what you call it. The most important thing is a method. You build the shelter by moving your rook to the 4th rank. 4th rank, you count the rows 1, 2, 3, 4. So you move your rook to the 4th rank. You will soon understand why we played the rook to the 4th rank. Now let's say black just makes a move. Now that you've built the shelter, you can take your king out. If black checks you, go there. Black checks you, go there or there, doesn't really matter. Black checks you, now you come up. Black checks you. Now the reason you move your rook to the 4th rank is so that when your king gets here, if black checks you, now you can block with your rook. That's a shelter for your king. If black takes your rook, you will take their rook and promote your pawn. And there's nothing that black can do here to save the game. Okay, going back to the initial position where the king was on d8, our rook was on e2, opponent's rook was on c1, and the king was on f7. I told you the first step is to push the opponent's king away by making this check. But someone might ask,
what if black doesn't go away but moves to e6 instead? What do you do then?
well, if they move to e6, in that case, they make things easier for us. We don't even have to build a shelter for our king now, because their own king will act as our shelter. Pay attention that at first, the opponent's king was able to check you. But since their king did not go away but moved this side, their king is our shelter now. So black cannot check us. So if you check them and they don't go away and come here instead, just remember, you don't have to build their shelter anymore. Their king is the shelter. All you will do, you will move your king. They cannot check you. It doesn't matter what they do. Let's say they come here, you will simply promote your pawn. Congratulations, now you master how to win the Lucena position. Endgame number 2. This position is referred to as the Philidor position. Basic characteristic of the Philidor position is that the player who is a pawn down managed to put his king in front of the pawn. So it is difficult for white to advance that pawn. So it will be a draw. but black needs to know the method of drawing this position. I cannot tell you how many players I've seen losing this position when they were supposed to draw it. Even players at a master level. More than 99.9% of players would play a check in this position. And guess what? It is a losing move. Unlike in the Lucena position where you keep on checking the opponent forever. In this position, white will simply go there and you cannot keep on checking them since they have a shelter. And white is also threatening a checkmate. If you try to block a checkmate by going there, white will go there, threaten a checkmate this side. If you come here, you lose the rook. So let's go to the initial position so that I can show you how you draw this position. You already know that a check is a losing move. The drawing method is to move your rook to the 6th rank. Remember this, you move the rook to the 6th rank. The reason you want your rook on the 6th rank is because when you check the opponent's king from the bottom, they can move in front of the pawn and use the pawn as a shelter. So you cannot keep on checking them with your rook since they have a shelter. So your rook on the 6th rank doesn't allow the king to go forward. It provokes white to move the pawn so that when you check them, they don't have a shelter now because two kings cannot check. So now someone might ask, what if they don't push the pawn? Well, if they don't push the pawn, it's quite clear they cannot push the king. And if they move the rook, you'll simply move up. If they check you again, you'll simply go down. And eventually they are going to push the pawn. And once they push the pawn, you bring your rook down now. If they push the king, you can make checks now. And you can see the difference that they cannot use the pawn as a shelter now, since kings cannot touch. However, if the pawn was still here, the opponent would use the pawn as a shelter. So that is why you needed to play the rook on the 6th rank. If they keep on moving, you just make a waiting move. Just keep your rook on the 6th rank until they push the pawn. Until they push the pawn, now your rook can go down. When you check them, they cannot hide anymore. And of course, they cannot go too far from the pawn because you will simply win that pawn. Keep on checking them. When they are too far from the pawn, you go behind the pawn and you are going to win that pawn. If they defend the pawn, you add an attack. So you are going to win the pawn and it will be a draw. Congratulations, now you master the two fundamental rook and pawn endgames every serious chess player should know. If you want to learn more about other important endgames every serious chess player should know, I recommend you watch the video above. This channel is committed to uploading at least one video per week, so please help us grow by smashing that subscribe button. Until next week, peace.